The webinar is being live streamed. All right.
All right, David, you have control of the live stream, so you should have control of my screen now.
Good. Okay. Hello. So I can start, right?
Yes, you can start.
Yeah, my name is David Olshan, and I work for Nevada Legal Services. And we're going to talk about habitability problems you may be having with your apartment or dwelling unit. I have been doing landlord-tenant law for about 30 years, and I've dealt with these thousands of these issues. So hopefully we can get some way that you can address it with your landlord and fix the problem in a relatively short amount of time. Oh, God, what happened? All right, so what is habitable? Look, I think if you're tuning in, you probably have a problem, so you know what habitable is. The roof may be leaking. You may have a problem with wind coming through the front door or window or something like that. You may lack sort of essential services like hot and cold running water or adequate heat or air conditioning. When you plug, the light socket might not be working. The railing on your stairs may be coming off. Those are some of the issues. And of course, some of the big ones are mold and pests, bed bugs, cockroaches, whatever. So if you do have those problems, they are habitability problems. NRS 118A290 contains a complete list of everything that's required in a dwelling unit in the state of Nevada. If you rent a unit in the state of Nevada and the landlord says you're renting this as is, it doesn't mean anything. It's not valid. The landlord has to give you a habitable dwelling unit at the inception of the tenancy. So there's no as-is situation here in Nevada. It's not a car. It's not a personal goods. It's an apartment. It's a dwelling unit, and it must be habitable. So keep that in mind. The landlord said, I'm not responsible. Well, the landlord probably is responsible, and you just need to hold the landlord's feet to the fire, and this is how you do it, by pursuing your rights under Nevada law. All right, so there's different procedures given the situation that you have. Let's say you have a leaky faucet. Well, that's going to be covered under habitability or a lease violation. That's 118A 350, 355, or 360. Essential services are covered by 118A 380. So all of these situations require you to provide notice to your landlord, and we're going to go through them. And we do have model forms that you can use on our website at nlslaw.net. So at the end of this discussion, if you do need those letters that you send to the landlord, we have copies of those on our website. So we'll give you the link and we'll help you address these problems with your landlord. Okay. So again, we're talking about a habitability problem. This is a leaky faucet. This is a roof leak. This is an electrical outlet that doesn't work, carpeting that may be coming up. These are habitability problems, and the landlord is required to maintain the dwelling unit in a habitable condition. So we're going to talk about 118A 350. 118A, well, no, we're not. We're going to talk about 118A 355. So 118A 355 is the majority of cases that we get. People want to get the landlord to do something. The way you get the landlord to do something is by withholding rent. And so 118A 355 contains the procedure for withholding rent. So first of all, you have to have a habitability issue. You need to notify the landlord of that habitability issue by sending written notice to the landlord and asking the landlord to fix the problem. I've got a leaky faucet and my toilet overflows. I'm asking you, landlord, to fix those problems within 14 days. And if you fail to fix those problems, I'm going to terminate the lease agreement, recover actual damages, or withhold rent. And those are your remedies under NRS 118A 355. If you want to withhold rent for a habitability issue, you're going to issue notice under 118A 355. And given the experience that we have here, If you really want the landlord to fix a problem, withholding the rent is the best way to do that. Now, you're going to provide notice to the landlord and give the landlord 2 weeks, 14 days to fix the problem. If the landlord doesn't fix the problem or use best efforts to fix the problem, then you can't for actual damages. My internet connection is unstable. That's great. So some of the conditions, if the landlord is trying to fix the problem using best efforts, then you can't seek your remedies. If you caused this problem or someone in your household caused the problem, then you can't use these remedies. Also, you're talking about withholding future rent. So we're in the middle of August right now. You can't withhold August rent, but you can withhold September rent. And you have to give the landlord 14 days to fix the problem. If you decide to withhold September's rent, you do that. If the landlord issues a 7-day pay rent or quit, you have a defense, but you have to take your rent money and deposit it with the court to have a defense to the eviction. A lease violation. Let's say it's not a habitability issue. Let's say it's something like the grass is dying and the grass is required to be maintained by the landlord and it's in your lease. Well, that's a lease violation, not a habitability problem. So we're talking about 118A 350, and if it doesn't meet the definition of habitability, but it is a lease violation, give the landlord, again, 14 days to fix the problem. And if the landlord doesn't fix the problem, you can't withhold rent under 118A 350, but you can sue for damages or you can terminate the lease and leave. That's basically what I just said. You have to give 14 days. You have to give written notice to the landlord. If the landlord doesn't fix the problem or use best efforts, you can terminate the lease or recover actual damages. All right, there's also an underuse section, 118A 360. This allows you to repair and deduct. However, you can't repair and deduct if the cost is going to be more than 1 month's rent. So if it's a broken roof, for instance, that's leaking, very likely the cost to repair is going to be more than 1 month's rent. If it is, you can't repair and deduct. If it's a relatively small issue that it will not cost more than 1 month's rent, you can issue the landlord a 14-day notice and notify the landlord that you will repair the problem and deduct the cost from next month's rent. Now, of course, this does require you to pay money, but if you want it fixed and the landlord's not going to fix it and it doesn't cost more than 1 month's rent, you can use 118A 360 to repair and deduct. You can only use repair and deduct once every 12 months. And the landlord or the lease may specify that the work should be done by a contractor or by certain parties. So read your lease before you repair and deduct. Essential services. Essential services and essential items or services. Now, essential items was added about 10 years ago to 118A 380, and it really covered the situation where Siegel Suites or Bigelow Properties would put a pin in your door when you were late with the rent. So you didn't have a lock that worked on your dwelling, and so that would be an essential item. If the landlord does do that, that would violate 118A 380, and you can seek your remedies. But usually, traditionally, it applied to heat, hot and cold running water, gas, or air conditioning if it is required in your lease or supplied by the landlord when you move in. So here in Las Vegas, many people assume that air conditioning is an essential service. Well, it's not. It's not if it's not required in your lease, and it's not an essential service if the landlord didn't provide it when you moved in. So just keep that in mind. Some people just assume because it's 110 degrees, air conditioning has to be an essential service. It's not under Nevada law. But if the landlord did supply it, and most landlords do, it'd be surprising if the landlord didn't. you can give the landlord a 48-hour letter, that requires the landlord to fix the air conditioning. You're going to exclude weekends and holidays. But if the landlord doesn't fix it or use best efforts to fix it, then you can seek your remedies under Nevada law. Now, these remedies are a little bit different. And one of the things that you can't do under 118A380 is terminate the lease. So if you have an air conditioning or heat or hot and cold running water that's not working and you want to terminate your lease, you're going to use some other statute, a 14-day letter, for instance, because that will give you the right to terminate the lease if the landlord doesn't fix the problem. Now, something else to keep in mind is the landlord's the lack of essential service should be based on the landlord's willful or negligent action. That's pretty easy to establish. There's a statutory duty to supply hot water, for instance. If you don't have hot water, that statute is a standard of care. The landlord's breached it, so you would be able to proceed under 118A380. There are certain situations, for instance, if the landlord is paying for utility service and the landlord is broke and can't pay the bills and your power or gas is terminated, that may not be the landlord's willful or negligent action. So it's something to keep in mind. It's a loophole for the landlord. If it's not based on the landlord's willful or negligent action or inaction, you can't proceed under 118A380. All right, so if you proceed under 118A380, you can't proceed under any of the other, you can't proceed under 118A350 or 360. And if you give the landlord written notice and the landlord doesn't fix the problem within 48 hours or use best efforts to fix it, you may repair and deduct. It's kind of difficult to do with air conditioning. It's difficult to do with some of these major issues, but the statute does allow you to repair and deduct. You can sue the landlord for actual damages. You can withhold rent that becomes due. So again, it's September rent. Also under 118A380, if you haven't paid the rent, if you're in default, you can't use 118A380. All right, the final thing you can do is you can basically, it's called abatement. You can move out and rent a room in a hotel, for instance, while you don't have air conditioning or hot and cold running water. We don't recommend this because as soon as you move out under abatement, the landlord will assume that you abandoned and just re-rent it. So the idea here is that by abating the rent, the landlord's going to have incentive to fix it. No, the landlord's just going to have incentive to rent it to someone else. So we don't encourage people, unless they want to withhold rent, we don't really encourage people to use 118A380 simply because the remedies are kind of insufficient. All right, so under 118A350, you don't have to deposit the rent with the court. If you do withhold rent and the landlord fixes the problem, you have to pay the landlord immediately. Let's talk a little bit about notice. If these cases go to court, it's very helpful for the court and for you if you keep a copy of everything that you send the landlord, receipts, notices, anything. There could be code enforcement that comes out. Get a copy of whatever they do, because the court's going to want to know that there was a legitimate habitability problem and that you notified the landlord. If that's the case, usually the court will accept that you withheld rent, and the court won't evict you if you either under 118A355 deposit that rent with the court, or under 380 keep that rent to pay the landlord if the landlord ultimately fixes the problem. Oh, I believe that's it. Okay, so again, nlslaw.net. We do have copies of a habitability letter, a lease violation letter, a repair and deduct letter, and an essential services letter. So if you need those copies of those letters to send to the landlord, go to our website, nlslaw.net, and you can download them and use them to send to your landlord if you have a habitability problem. So do I have any questions? Marina?
No.
Brianna?
No, there are no questions right now. Oh, wait, I have one on YouTube. Is
Okay,
fixing an oven broiler a habitability issue?
yes. So the real question was the appliance working when you moved in? Very likely it was, and if it's broken, the landlord has an obligation to fix it.
I am the owner and a tenant is almost 2 months behind on rent. Can tenant withhold rent and not pay?
Well, it depends. If it's under 118A 355, they can withhold the rent. If it's under 118A 380, they can't. So if it is essential services, the rent has to be current. If it's just a regular run-of-the-mill habitability issue, they can be late with the rent and still use the remedy, still withhold the rent under 118A 355.
What time frame do they have to fix it?
Well, for habitability, lease violation, repair and deduct, it's 14 days. Actually, under repair and deduct, it's sooner if conditions require. But under essential services, it's 48 hours excluding weekends and holidays.
All right, I think that's probably it for questions.
Okay. So if people go to our YouTube channel, Nevada Legal Services Now, this information will be there along with some landlord-tenant information. And if you need help, if you want to do an online intake, go to nlslaw.net.
All right. Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you, Brianna.
Bye.
Marina, too.
Bye, Marina.